rotate my texture just around a little. Just overpaint through here. In fact, I think I'm going to, I think I'll remove that completely. I don't think I'll have any of the white marks just through here. We can always add that in with a different texture, so let's get rid of that. Maybe we'll add it in through here, so that's just a bit more noticeable. These two are obviously repeating, so we'll have to remove one or the other. I think I'll remove the one here on the end. We can leave that little mark there, that's fine. Now I'm just going to look edge on to the vertical and horizontal here so that we get a proper blend happening just through here. That will be probably the darker part of the texture, maybe through here. And the same thing probably just down here on the bottom. That's just so we get a proper blend between the two sides there. We'll check this one as well. This one's not quite so bad, but we'll just blend it in the middle just here. We want probably maybe through here. No. Probably through here. Yeah. Okay, let's just have a check of what we've done at the front here. I think most of the model is done there. Let's jump to the top and work on this top edge through here. Again, I'm going to rotate my texture around. Oh, don't scale. Rotate my texture around just to follow the direction of the model. Again, remember we've got masking turned on so we don't accidentally overpaint an area we've already done. Let's paint all that in. Again, I'm just going to move that forward just a bit because I like to get that near the edge, that chip mark. Let's bake that down. We will move our model along, we'll rotate our texture around just a little bit. Again, these white marks we're going to have to paint out, so again that chip mark I want to move down towards the edge here. On color. We'll bake that down. Again, I want to paint out that white streak. Press the Alt key to bake it down. Let's move the texture around and just angle it, change the angle slightly. And again, I just want to get rid of those white marks that are popping in here and there. And again, I'm just going to rotate the texture, and I like the look of that chip on the edge, so I'm just going to move the texture into position and paint that chip in. And bake that down. So swing our model around and look at the back end here. Let's start with this white mark, I think. Let's rotate our texture around. I'm just pressing the Alt key to see the model and to hide the texture, just so I can line things up properly. Let's start with the white mark here in the middle, and we'll work our way out. I don't want this second white mark though, so I'm going to move the texture and overpaint it. I'm just going to bake that down. Rotate our texture around just a little bit and paint this out. Again, I don't want that white mark in there. I don't want this white mark here on the end either, so I'm just going to overpaint that to paint it out. I'm just going to bake it down by hitting the Alt key. We'll rotate it around so our masking is taking more of an effect. We'll rotate our texture around a little. Paint that in there. Also rotate it around and paint these side pieces in. We'll do the same thing here with the end. Let's paint that side piece in. So again, I'm going to rotate my texture and just paint that out through there. And maybe just through here. I want to paint out some of those dark lines that we're seeing, because you can see repetition happening a bit too much. So just going to paint over them. All right. Let's look at these bottom edges now, I think. Again, I'm going to rotate my model so our masking is taking effect. And sticking to the darker part of the texture, I'm just going to paint in these horizontal edges here. Again, rotating my texture to match the model as I paint along. Okay, hit the Alt key to bake that down. Let's work on this bottom piece of geometry. Again, I'm going to rotate my texture around a bit. And we'll paint that in. Again, keep rotating my texture as I move it around to match the model underneath. Again, we've got those dots showing up that are going to be noticeably repeating, so we'll have to remove them. All right, once we get this bit done here, let's just start painting out some of these repetitive sections. So these dots, maybe this dot here. Let's paint out these dots through here. Again, I'm going to hit the Alt key to bake it down. We can leave some of the dots in so long as they're not repeated along this part of the texture. I don't like some of these little black dots that are showing up though, so let's get rid of them. Here, here, maybe through here. Alright, just a bit of an overpaint required here where that line is showing up, so let's just overpaint that there. Alright, and again on this edge here I'm just going to overpaint to blend them together a little bit more. The same with this edge here is not too bad. Just going to overpaint this edge here to blend those two sides together a little better. And I'll use probably the darker part of the texture, I think. Oh. And we'll do the same with this edge just here. We'll use the lighter part of the texture down towards the bottom here. And again, I don't like all of those dots showing up, so I'm just going to remove a couple of them. Alright. These side pieces need to be painted over because we see texture stretching happening there, so let's just angle our model like that. And we will just rotate our texture slightly. Let's bake that down and repaint that corner just there. It needs a darker part of the texture, so just through there. I might paint out that white mark there, I think. But I may put one in. So I'm just going to rotate our model around a bit so we're looking more directly at it. Angle it up slightly. And we'll paint in this white mark through here, I think. Okay, let's just move our texture down a little. Paint that out through there. All right. I just want to fix that corner again now that we've overpainted it again. So let's jump around to the opposite side. Again, I'm just going to angle it slightly. We'll paint a bit of a white mark down here on this side. Move that texture down a little and paint that in. Move it over slightly. Just paint out some of that repetition there. Okay. I'm just painting along that white edge there to blend them together a little better. Alright, let's work on the underside here, I think. Yeah, the top of the underside. So again, I'm just going to rotate my model until it's in the right spot. Again, I'm angling it enough so that masking is taking effect here. And if you find painting this way a little bit more difficult, I find this easier to paint up a 3D model, but you can always jump into the UV viewport in Mari and paint on the UVs directly if you find that easier. Painting in 3D though, you can paint across UV seams and get your model looking, paint across UV seams much more easily. So that's one of the reasons I like to work in 3D. Just paint that in through there. We'll bake that down. Alright, let's rotate our texture around just a little bit. And bake it down. Let's work on these side pieces now. Again, rotate our texture to match the model. And just paint those in. And bake them down. Let's work on these bottom edges now. And again, even though my brush is bigger than the bit that we're painting on, because we have masking turned on, we're not going to overpaint an area accidentally. Press the Alt key to bake it down. Let's jump across around to the other side. And do the same thing. Rotate our texture the other way though. Move it down and paint those in. And bake them down. All right. We still have to do the bottom edge here. And we have to add some different dirt layers on the top to blend things a bit better, so we will do that in just a minute. Let's just quickly save our project here and export it, the texture, so we can bring it back into Max and have a quick look at it. So we export flattened, export everything flattened. We're still in our rework folder here. Again, we're going to pop a star here so we can see what we're doing. Banister curved adder is the old texture map, so let's call it that, but we're going to do underscore painted. So export all patches. Alright, let's jump back into Max. Into our material editor here, and let's swap out this old bitmap for the one that we just painted up. Curved outer, it's that one there. Alright. Okay. That's just so we can see what the areas that we have to, any areas we have to fix. It's easier to do it in Max than in Mari sometimes. Okay. All right, so let's start adding a bit more interest, I think, to these banisters. So that white mark at the front is okay. I don't really like the one here though, so I think I'll remove the inside white mark on the end here. Anyway, let's jump back into Mari. And let's rotate our texture around and remove these white marks on the end here. I don't like the look of them. So again, I'm just going to scale my model up so it just about fits the viewport. Rotate my model around just a bit. I'll rotate my texture to match. And I want to overpaint those white marks. We'll bake that down. I think I'll get rid of the ones here as well, I think. All right. Let's put a white mark here on the inside piece as well. One of these white line running texture marks. I think that would look interesting. So let's just find one that we haven't used quite so much. Maybe this one here. Let's paint that through. Let's leave this side. Actually, no, let's paint one in here as well, I think. I'm just going to rotate my texture around a bit and line it up. Rotate my model as well. I just want to paint that white line down through here. And just blend it in a bit. This is what I mean by overpainting areas you've already painted. Once you have a look at it in the 3D program in place, oftentimes you'll find that you want to overpaint sections. So all right. Don't actually like that way, the way that the dark and the light are there, so I'm just going to find a part of the texture where I can blend them together a bit more. It's probably not a good spot. Again, I don't want that white line showing up, so I'm just going to overpaint that as well so that these two blend together a bit more. And just looking on the texture here and the area I want to paint in to try and get an area that I think will blend properly. Maybe like that. All right, now let's work on this bottom edge now, I think. So I'm going to rotate my model probably that way, so it's facing slightly backward. Again, I'm going to rotate my texture to match the model underneath. Or the direction of the model underneath. Again, I don't want any of these white lines really. So I'm just going to paint them out. And these little white dots showing up I want to paint out. Just going to bake that down. You're going to have to be careful on this edge, because if you go too high you're going to paint over the front section here, so it's probably better to angle the model forward slightly so that there's some masking happening here on that edge. That way you won't accidentally overpaint the that front edge through there. Again, I don't want these white lines showing up, so again I'm just rotating the model around a bit. I'm going to paint those white marks out. Again, we've got our white mark there, so let's just get rid of that. And also these dots that are showing up as repeating, I want to remove them as well. You could leave some of them in if you wanted to, but I prefer to get rid of them. Now I'm just looking around the model to see if there are any areas that I haven't painted out yet with the underlying texture. And it looks like we've got a bit of stretching happening there, so let's just fix that up. Again, rotate my texture. Just blend that in. I'm just going to check the opposite side, see if there is any stretching happening there. There's not, but there's just a bit of an error here at the where the texture looked like it may have been overpainted a little, so let's just fix that up. Bake that down. Okay. Now I'm going to pull in on the model a bit here to get this line that we see showing up. And that was obviously because of the masking that happened when we were painting on one area. So I'm just going to angle it slightly back like that. Actually, paint it like that. Okay. And this end just down here. Again, I'm angling the model so that the masking is taking effect. Again, I don't want any of that white showing up through here, so well, a little bit here on the end is fine. Press the Alt key to make it down, scale back out a bit. Alright, so we have our base color laid down. Let's start playing with some dirt now, I think. It's always fun to play with some dirt. So let's throw down a new layer. Remember, when we're going to change textures, we always add a new layer. I'm going to turn masking off. Go back into our image manager here and grab a texture that will be good for dirt. So let's see what this one looks like. Again, this one will be okay. Now, like I said, with the dirt textures, you can scale up and down without too much of a problem. Let's work with this one here. I'm going to scale it up just a bit. I'm actually going to turn masking back on. I've changed my mind. It just helps me see the edges a little bit more easily. So let's paint that in. Now we're going to change the layer style on this, so don't worry about overpainting what we've already done. You'll see it come through once we change the layer style. Just going to rotate our texture to match that underlying angle of the model. All right. Paint that through. I'll press the Alt key to bake that down. Again, rotating the texture from the end to have more control over it so it doesn't spin out of control when you're rotating it. I'm only concerned with the white part of the texture here, so not the black. Don't pay much attention to the black part. And this texture is basically an alpha map or a grayscale map that I'm using for the dirt. Okay, we'll paint that in. Alright, let's bake that down. Let's add another layer, maybe down here on the bottom edge, I think. So I'm going to rotate the model back slightly. And we're going to paint that in. Alright, we'll bake that down. Let's change our layer style here and have a look. Maybe an add. And we'll pull it down just a bit. Maybe like that. Let's jump around to the other side. We're still working on the same layer with the same texture. Let's throw it here along this bottom edge through there. So again, I'm just going to rotate my model a bit. And you can see it actually as if you prefer to work this way where you don't see black and white, but you see it as it will look. You change your layer style before you start painting. It's whichever way you generally prefer to work. There is no one way to do it that's right and one that's wrong. It's whatever works for you. Okay, we'll bake that down. And I think I may do this bottom edge down through here. So again, I'm going to rotate my model slightly. So I'm going to scale my texture down just a bit through here. Alright, let's bake that down. Let's throw on a new layer and grab a new texture. Let's see. It's always handy just to have a folder of these dirt textures that you can use to add to objects. And again, like I said, they're just alpha maps or grayscale maps. Let's see what this one looks like. This one may work. Let's work on this bottom edge down through here, I think. So I'm just going to scale the texture down. Again, I'm going to rotate it around. With this one, we're mainly concerned with the dark part of the texture, not the light part. So I'm going to paint that in. We'll rotate it around a bit. Blend them together and just paint that in. We'll bake that down. Let's throw it along this top edge through here, I think. Scale it down a bit and paint it in. Press the Alt key to bake it down. And let's work on this bit at the end. Rotate it around. Okay, we'll bake that down. Let's jump around to the opposite side here and let's do it on. Let's do it on. Let's do it on this bottom edge here. Just because we've already painted one layer on doesn't mean we can't paint another. So just going to scale it up a little bit. And we'll paint that in.